Hey everybody, welcome back to the Personal Transformation Podcast. My name is Dan Story, and this session is going to be impactful. I hope you've got some coffee and some energy drink or some pre-workout or something, because I'm speaking with the one and only Kate McKay. She's a speaker, she's an author, and she is also a crazy gym-going physique athlete. I don't know the physique term, like there's so many different female terms. You're going to inform us on that in today's show. But let me tell you, this is going to be a whole bunch of energy, so strap in tight. Kate, welcome to the show.
So excited to be here, Dan. This is amazing. I was
We
excited.
we were just touching base. You're the kind of crazy that I like. Like, I think crazy is good, right? If we're too sane, if we're just playing safe, if we're playing by the rules, things get very boring, but also we tend to get stuck. So I like this kind of going to the edge and bring the energy. So I'm excited about what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about challenge. We're going to talk about pushing ourselves. We're going to talk about the impact that things like gym and fitness and competing can have on not just like stepping on stage. I think a lot of people look at it and say, oh, it's superficial, you fake tan, and no. It's not about that. It's about what we kind of realize. So I'm looking forward to having those conversations. I know there's some crazy stuff that's happened in your life, so we're probably going to dive into that and see how that's created you as a human and how you've used that to grow. And I know you were talking as well. You want to talk about mental fortitude. So let's start there. Let's talk about mental fortitude. Why was that one of the topics that you wanted to bring up today? Why is that so important in your life right now?
First of all, isn't that word the best? Like, I believe that word fortitude just does something to my DNA. And maybe that's just my athletic mindset. But I believe that having, I call it psychological fortitude, is the core basis of how I've been able to not only survive, but thrive, much success, but also some incredible adversity. And I don't know where I would be without it. And I believe it, much of the languaging now that you hear is the conversation around resiliency. And I believe that what we're missing in this conversation is that the foundation of resiliency really has to go hand in hand with psychological fortitude, because without fortitude, you got nothing. Resilience is just going to make you blow in the wind, you know?
I love this. I've been studying this year after a crazy kind of last year. That last year was pretty tough mentally for me, but I've been looking into this concept of mental toughness. You call it mental fortitude. It's this idea that, because resilience is important. I had an amazing podcast with a guy just a few weeks ago talking about resilience. And for me, resilience, I think as humans, we're resilient. Like, you just went through a hurricane, which is pretty resilient. But resilience is passive for me. Resilience is like, I'm gonna get punched in the face. The old Rocky quote is like, it's not about how hard you get hit, it's about how many times you get hit and get up. It's like, we can do that. I think human beings are pretty much wired just to take as much crap and get beaten down. But at some point, you got to ask a question, which is, all right, well, I'm just going to stay here, or I'm going to come back up. And I think that's the fortitude piece, right? That is the ability to take the adversity, but then move forward and turn it into something good. So is that the kind of thing that you're saying, is like take adversity and you're able to still move forward?
Also, I believe it's the holding ground, right? That, the biggest trees, you think of like the weeping willow, it's often found in swampy soil. So it's huge and it has to dig its roots, and its roots are very deep, but it's also somewhat pliable and bendable. But it's not a tree that tends to go down easily, even though it's in really swampy soil. So I believe that fortitude is the foundation, that if someone came up to you and pushed at you, you're going to be able to like hold ground. And I know that that's unusual for women oftentimes to speak in that terms, because women are built to yield. That's our gift as a woman. I'm honored that I'm a woman and that our position is the receptor. We're gifted with that. And yet at the same time, we also have to have a sense of will and determination on what we believe and what we value. And without that, life can be very, very difficult, I believe.
Yeah, I think we can talk about archetypes or stereotypes or whatever it is, and I'm very comfortable talking about that. I don't have any problems with these kind of different colors of them. It's all the same thing, right? We've either got a leading role to play, or we're a servant role. I don't think either of them are bad, but I think it's just recognizing that, and it's not necessarily just gender, but it's like sometimes we have to drive, sometimes we have to, like you say, yield. Where do you see that has played the biggest part in your life? Where has mental fortitude helped you the most? And then the next question is going to be is how did you figure out you had it? Because I think that's the thing, right? For me, it's we don't know we've got it until we kind of get into those moments where we find out. But where for you were some of those key moments? Then we'll dive into how you build it.
Yeah, Dan, that's a great question. I think that a lot of times people who have a lot of fortitude have always been friggin' different. Like we just have been either people thought we were obsessed or weird or loners or single-minded or whatever that word was that you heard that you were too of. Like for me, it was I was too enthusiastic. I was too physical. I was, those things that were too are often the descriptive of who we are really at a core. And oftentimes those are the pieces that we hide. Those are the pieces that we have to hide because other people critique or criticize and look down at those parts that make us unique. And there was some part of me, this indomitable spirit, which I wasn't going to take that lightly. And I know it was a little bit tough growing up in a family of 9 because I was the youngest girl. I was very reactive. And they would say that I was dramatic, but they picked on me and I would cry and I would respond, right? I was somewhat of a fiery one, but I never really felt like I fit in, Dan, to be perfectly honest. I always felt like I was unique. I was different. And that created much of my success in a vacuum. That I felt much of my achievement was because I was not like my family of origin. I wasn't like the other people at school. I just felt unusual. And it's been a journey to accept this core belief that it is because I have fortitude and I've been able to persevere through some extraordinary challenges and still get up smiling and laughing and finding a way to still bring the light and the power and the enthusiasm to the world.
Never stop with the enthusiasm. We need that. We need that. So here's a question for you. At what point did you, for me, in journeying, as I talk to people and as I watch people like you, I think it's phenomenal. There's a period of life where we listen to people, where we hear that you're too much, you're too this, you're too that, and we respect their opinion, maybe a little bit too much. And we're like, oh, okay, let me play it down, or let me not express that part of myself. Then at some point, I don't know how long this phase is in the middle, but then at some point there's a transition to actually I love that part of myself, and that is what brings me out, and that's who I am. How did you cross that gap? Like at what point did you realize, you know what, if I'm going to do anything, I've got to accept this person, I've got to be me, I've got to be comfortable in my own skin? How did that evolution happen?
It's a phenomenal question. I still think I'm figuring it out. And I think that it's because when you grow up in a big family, you're so used to adapting. And by nature, I'm an extraordinary adaptable person. I love people. I just came back from an incredible, red carpet event with just some incredibly successful people from all over the world in LA. And I'm as comfortable with the photographer and the people who are doing the dishes as I am with the CEO. I want to be with people. I don't want to be with one type of person. And that's why I was so excited, because it was so international, so diverse. And so I think that because I'm so adaptable, thinking and also knowing and living with strong fortitude is almost like an anomaly. And yet I found a way to manage it. And the reason why I say that I'm sort of just figuring it out is because I'm 7 years out from losing my son. My son, as his friends describe it, ascended on his own accord in 2017. And he and you and I were talking about this, I believe we had a partnership. We had an agreement that I came in here to heal some pretty intense stuff in my family of origin. And I just have to say to you that my son was exquisite. And the reason why I'm writing the book, and I'll be sharing with your audience a free copy of the abbreviated version of the Agility Mindset. This is my thesis. And this is like what happened when I just turned 61, is that I have a thesis. And the thesis is that mental fortitude, that understanding that balance is actually bullshit. There's no such thing as balance. We're here to make impact. We can serve and do our work at the same time. And number 3 is resilience. Number 4 is we've got to be curious and innovative. And number 5, we need people. We need to have a tribe of A gamers that are helping us rise and play a higher game. And this is the part where I'm just moving into right now, Dan, and why I'm on this call with you and doing more outreach is because I've succeeded solo. I functioned with the world and done really well and been well loved. And at the same time, much of my success has been in a silo. And I'm done with that. And that's a beautiful part. And my son personified the agility mindset because he was the most gritty, most determined, most curious, most beautiful and obsessed human that I've ever met. And I honor him by walking his light every day.
That's phenomenal. I'm going to dive into that because I need to understand, and I think not just me, but I have a curiosity for it. But people at the moment, I was chatting with some friends. We went for brunch on Sunday about grief and people not being able to process grief very well. I think people could use something like that as an excuse to shrink. You haven't. You've used it as the entire fire for doing the entire opposite of shrinking. You're going to use it to kind of power the next stage of what's coming. But a lot of people will use that as an excuse. They'll use something smaller as an excuse. They'll use, I was listening to a Goggins video on the stepper last night as I was doing my cardio. It's like, I'm not even going to try and do a Goggins impression.
Yeah.
He's like, it was raining and somebody said they didn't want to come out for a run. So I did 50 miles and I ran back to their house and I knocked on their door and I kicked their butt and then I went and did another 50. It was like it's that kind of mindset of just, I'm going to get it done regardless of kind of adversity. I remember prepping for a show last year and my dad died during prep. Now, we knew it was coming. He had an 8-year battle with cancer, and he stretched it out. We can make cancer jokes now in the family, and it's still completely inappropriate. But because we've been there, that humor is one way of approaching things.
Absolutely.
But like you, I'm not going to stop doing the show. I'm going to do it because I'm going to honor him and his engagement and his support. And yeah, did I go to the funeral with a little Tupperware food? Yeah, of course I did. But whatever, it's all good. People just understand.
Right.
Let's kind of come back to you. So I think there's pain. We can't avoid pain. There's pain, there's sadness. Clearly, losing a son must be, and I know you lost your brother as well when you were younger, so maybe we'll come into that, but I can't imagine anything more painful than losing a child. Like, I have a 4-year-old daughter now. She's everything to me. And I just, even watching something on TV gives me nightmares that just wake me up in swaps. So I can't imagine what it would actually be like to go through it. I only haven't gone through it. Imaginary. How do you reframe that pain? How do you take that pain? And what was that journey like for you? How long did it take? What were the stories you had to tell? What were some of the kind of hurdles you had to go through to stop that from crumbling you and turn it into something that actually connects you back together again?
Yeah. Well, first I would say I honor you and your beautiful daughter. And what I say to people when they say, I can't imagine, well, don't imagine, please. because it's not in your reality and it's nothing that you want to imagine because it's unimaginable. And therefore we don't imagine it. And so, I believe that I saw a model of how someone loses someone and falls apart as my mother did. And I said, hell no, am I going to do what she did? My mother retreated. She became a drinker. My parents got divorced. It blew my family apart. And I knew that the best way, as you did with your dad, my dad and my son Will both died in the same year within months of each other. So it was like, I lost 2 men that actually probably in my life respected me more than anybody in my life. So in 1 year, right? But I knew that the way that I was going to deal with it was not sitting down in the grief, understanding it's a mess. It is a mess. Grief is a messy, messy process. But I was a public figure. People knew who I was. And they're like, how's Katie, Miss Positivity, going to manage this? And everyone's just like eyes wide open. I'm a private person. Even though I'm an outgoing person, I'm very private. And I don't want to talk about what I had to talk about. I don't want to live in it. I don't want to be in that mess. But, bottom line is I was given an opportunity to do things differently and I rose to it. That's fortitude right there, dude. Because I just knew that I was here for more than this, that my son's life meant more than that. And my mission statement is kind of funny, was to live powerfully with courage and enthusiasm. That's super easy to do when life's good. But I remember that one morning, it was probably a week after Will passed, and I was laying next to my daughter. She and I were sleeping together for a couple weeks after. And I'm just like touching her hair and looking at her, and then just tear coming down my face. And it was like calm. And I was like, God, you got a sense of humor, because if there's a way to do grief with courage and enthusiasm and do it powerfully, watch me. And that was my commitment. And I've lived into it. And, you know, and I just want to say, grief is never final. It's always a rolling process. And every stinking day, I choose to live. Okay. Choose to live, because I could say to you, and I'm being completely honest and transparent, that my greatest gift that I've done, my greatest thing that I've done, is to birth an angel and release that child to God. So for me, I'm like, okay, I'm good. Peace out, right? Because I do believe that I did that. I birthed someone that was angelic and then released him. So I'm sorry, what's more than that in this life? And so every day I have to determine that I'm going to live. And it doesn't always, it's a little Goggins-esque, I have to be perfectly honest, because it's not always from a place of, I'm going to live. It's, fuck, I'm going to live. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep rising and shining and being in the glory of who my son was and who I came here to be. Because God didn't give me a small role here in this.
You wake up every day, you get a massive punch in the stomach, and it's like, what am I going to do with that? It's like, you have a choice.
And it's different, right? I mean, and I think that this is something that's really important that we address, because you're a man and I work a lot with men, and in particular around grief. And one of the articles that I wrote that was really pivotal in the book that I wrote, called Claim Your Inner Warrior, which is dedicated to men, is about how men express grief and loss. And daggone it, Dan, men do it different than women. They do it different than women. It doesn't make it wrong. If men don't cry, it doesn't make it wrong. Men don't, you know, like I had a guy say to me, dude, I just never cried after my mom died. And I'm like, do you feel like you had to? And he's like, no. I said, it's okay. So we have to let men be in their shades of grief, because it looks different than women. It looks very, very different. And yet
everyone's journey is different.
Yes. And yet the most important thing that I will say to you, and I usually say this towards the end of the podcast, but we have to understand that even though grief is different, men still need community. It's the number one step in self-care, is community for men. Men need people. Little did I know with my son, I thought, oh my gosh, I birthed a priest. He was meditating 8, 9, 10 hours a day. I didn't know that that was bad. I thought it was an honor. I was brought up Catholic. So he was a Buddhist. He was studying Buddhism. He was going to be a Buddhist monk. So I thought, how cool. Like, right? Little did I know that's called spiritual bypass. And he had isolated himself. And, you know, sometimes you never know what isolation looks like. Now I know. So
did you get any guidance? So I was lucky. I had access to an online platform with some coaches and guidance counselors and stuff like that. And I had a conversation before my dad died, and the guy asked me, he said, do you know how to help someone die? I'm like, what? Like some kind of crazy, you know, question, but I hadn't actually thought about it. And he said, you got to have those conversations like while they're alive, the ones that you want to have while they're alive, that you don't want to regret not having. I think that for me was the biggest thing. And we had a couple of conversations, one of which he wasn't engaged in. It was just me just saying stuff. And I think the other one was earlier, and we had a proper conversation. I cried. I definitely cried, but I didn't cry at the same time. It was weird. I cried at a different time and for different reasons and all those kind of things. But I think it's interesting. It's men and women definitely deal with it differently. So here's a question. So men compartmentalize. I'm going to massive justification, just generalization. We'll go with it. Men tend to compartmentalize. So it's like, all right, I've got this problem. I'll put that over there. Deal with that later. Like you said, you're a public figure. You're a woman. People are looking at you in this time to be the role model. How did you integrate the two and stay in the moment? So did you compartmentalize and say, right, I'm going to push over there and we'll deal with it later? Did you accept all the craziness that was going on, and were you able to communicate it clearly, like early on? What did that look like for you?
I think I have a gift of language, and I'm very keyed in. I was a theater major, so I'm extremely articulate in expressing emotional experience. And it may come across like I'm too articulate because I never really I don't lose it. I never do. Like if I'm mad, you're not going to want me mad at me because they won't lose it and you won't find a reason to swear at me and flip out because I'll be super calm when I'm upset. And that's not, it's a little bit disconcerting. But I would say the one word that I have that I honor is I have a high level of spiritual and psychological discernment. That I can sort of pull back and look bird's eye at what's going on, There's one thing that you said that I thank you so much for sharing your dad, because he clearly was an amazing man through you. And I get to experience him through you as you get to experience my son, Will. And I love that you brought up the idea of having conversation with people. And one of the things that I want to say to any of you, and this is the challenge with losing someone to suicide, is that you never have those conversations, right? But I felt like when people are living, that's when you have the conversations. And at the end of my mom's life, because my mom just died last October, I was able to have, my mother she couldn't handle when my son Will died. She basically had to shun me. My whole family did, because it was too painful. I was too public in the grief that everyone in my family was holding underneath. So they're like, Katie, stop talking about it. I'm like, oh, hell no.
Yeah.
So, even in grief, I had to do it solo, unfortunately. Right. So I had to have the right therapist. I had a team of people, but it wasn't in my family. Yeah. I made everyone uncomfortable. But the most beautiful thing is as my mom was dying, I was able to come back to her and we had the most powerful conversations. One of them is this is this is why, again, I can rest my head. And I hug her and I bring her head to my chest and I'm hugging her and I go, Mom, we did a good job with our boys. We did a good job with our boys. And she goes, Katie, I don't see them as two. I see them as my one child. And I said, Mom, that is so beautiful. Oh, literally, that's what she said. I see them as one. And if that isn't me doing all that hard ass grief work, I don't know what is. But I swear, I do believe that I did a lot of work, and Will and I did a lot of work to help that happen. That my mother could die with extraordinary peace. And I was the lucky one to see my mom as she was passing. And you know what I said to her, as my shaman told me to say to her? Mom, Will is waiting. All he's saying is, it's so easy to walk into the light of God. It's so easy. And it was the most beautiful death ever. Would I have been able to do that if I hadn't lost something so tragically? No. But death can be beautiful. And I feel honored that I was able to guide my mother through.
That's amazing. I don't think I've ever been on this side of the equation on my own podcast. Normally, I'm the one trying to get other people into kind of emotional things. I'm just saying, keep it into, I've got the little tears coming in. But I agree with you. I think one of the biggest privileges in life is helping somebody die well that you care about, that has helped raise you and shape you as a person. So, well done. Well done for having those conversations with your mum. It's interesting. We were talking about this. I had this realization the other day, and you talked about how family wasn't the space for you. And maybe we transition now. We've done a little talk about grief. Let's kind of come out of there and it was good. Maybe we'll come back. We'll see. We'll go with it. We've still got plenty of time.
This is the best thing about men too, I have to say. That we can do this and we can make that transition perfect. It's completely not even necessary to I love this. I love you, Dan. You're the best.
So it's there. It's an experience. We've had it. We don't want to dilute it. We don't want to delete it.
No,
it's there
not at all.
But let's also appreciate it. And like you did, it's like, okay, celebrate it and let's move on.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that family was a challenge for you. You deal with things in a particular way. Your family didn't necessarily recognize it, appreciate it. So that stability you lost, you didn't have stability. You didn't, it's, for me, I had this realization the other day. If you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we need to have our life built on something. We need a foundation or rock that allows us to go somewhere during times of crisis, right? And for some people, like we say, it's family. You can just go there, you can just be yourself, and you can just chill out, and they're not going to judge you. They're just going to love you and give you support. Some people, it's work. They go to work, they're so good, they're so invested. That's their place. They go there and everything is okay. The world might be falling apart around them, but they go into the zone, they're effective. Like you said, you mentioned one earlier, church. Maybe it's a different community, or it could be a sports team or some kind of group of people that you go to that gives you certainty and appreciation and respect, and you don't need to be anybody else other than who you are. And I think there's different places like that. Some people don't find it in any of those. Some people, I think, find it in the gym. And I think this is one of those areas that me and you probably have somewhat in common, is the rest of the world can be going crazy, but the gym is the safe place. How do you view the gym, and how is the gym and workout and fitness and all that kind of stuff, how has that helped you stay sane in what is clearly a crazy world?
What would we do without it? What would we do without it? Even during COVID, I had to find a way to stay fit and be in that experience. But the gym has always been my sanctuary since I was 21. So I've been lifting weights for 40 years. It's been my thing. I've competed for 18 of those. Started competing in bikini at 43 after I had my kids. So, and I competed in bodybuilding like in my 20s, but it was very just bodybuilding. But it's been my thing. It's been my through line. It's been the most consistent thing. And I believe it's foundational to who I am. And I've fought the identity for sure, because, Dan, you and I, we're from different generation, right? I'm 20 years older than you. But when I first started lifting weights, women weren't in the gym. I was in all men's gym. It was across the hall from a boxing gym. It was on the 3rd floor in Somerville, very like the hood, and you're walking up the hall and it's all the halls are filled with spit and blah, blah, blah. Right. But I would come in there and I'd be like, oh, right. It was my home. It was the place that I was most safe. And it's been the most consistent place for me, for sure. Absolutely.
You just reminded me of, and we're not that far, I'm only 15 years behind. So I'm closing in. But I remember the first gym I went to, and there was an upstairs and downstairs, right? It was at a squash club. And so there was the upstairs was the girls' gym, and downstairs was the boys' gym. And the boys' gym had all the weights machines, and it had, do you remember those decline benches with the little triangle that you put your legs over and you did your crunches?
Oh, yeah, I love those.
Back in the day, they were amazing. And like there's the clunkiest old weights that were slightly rusty and very cold on certain days. And then upstairs, you had these weird like in or out of thigh machines, and some like, you mentioned it, like the bands that you put around your waist and it kind of shake everything loose, and toning table. Do you remember toning table? Just lie there and like lose your legs around for you, and you're like, this is a great workout. I think luckily the evolution has been fun. Like you probably were one of the pioneers, the people at the spearhead of that, with regards to competing and training as a full athlete. So what was that like? What was it like then? And what were the kind of reactions you got then? And how has that evolved, do you think, in recent times?
Well, first, and very much the perspective of people, is that if you worked out or cared about what you look like, you were vain, number one, vain. And number two, you were stupid, that you were not smart. So there was an absolute, not only were you egoic, but you weren't very smart. So I've had those people's perception of me. And I laugh about it. And I say to people even now, listen, I'm a lot smarter than I am cute, because people think she's so attractive at her age. She's so fit. But she probably isn't smart too, right? Or whatever that is. There is a bias towards people who are fit. And I lived through that. And I think it's less. And now I own it with a little bit more of a badge that I am 61 years old and I've got a body of a 30-year-old, right? And I earned it. And I work at it, and it is for my brain health. And I think that a lot of people who don't understand the sport of bodybuilding and whatever we are and whatever its alliteration, you and I, is that bodybuilders are the biggest nerds. We live so cleanly. We take care of ourselves at a level. We are extremely educated, because there's not a person that knows more about the art and science of the body and how the body works and the evolution of the body. And we're also deeply caring, and we're introverted in their way that we live our lives in general. And yet we're very principled people. It's a whole culture that you can only experience if you're in the gym. And I honor that now, right? But it's been years of having to be like, oh, well, I compete in bikini. I never told anybody. I would just be like, Even I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm doing a show in 6 weeks, or oh yeah, I'm competing in 2. I never told anybody because there were always so much judgment about it. You know, I had 3 young kids. They're like, what are you doing now? Midlife crisis, you know, walking around in the stripper heels. But I just want to give one short story about the competition component. And that is, I don't compete for the stage. I leave my trophies there. Like I give them to the janitor and the kid. I don't care about the competition. I'm the one that's the most prepared potentially, but I'm the one backstage having fun, dancing, helping everyone because I come to win and I prepare to win. And yet I'm prepared and I have fun. I still bring in the joy, but I compete for this. I had a client. I'm not going to use her name, but her letter is L. And I said, babe, I want you to write your book. You said you want to write your book, write your book, write your book. And she was like, oh, I don't really want to, because I knew she had traumatic past. And I felt like this was in the way of her coaching. I'm a coach. I'm here to help people in their present and create a magnificent future, right? But sometimes there is something from our past that if we write about it, we can leave it and then move forward. So I said, write the book. So she sends me the book. And it was, Dan, it was horrific. The amount of abuse that she had, you know, she was chained to her garage by her father inside the garage and abused. I'm reading it. I'm sobbing. And I'm like, I can't believe I made her write it. I'm crying. I call her up and she said, I said, I am so sorry I made you write that. I'm so sorry. I'm crying. And I'm like, so unprofessional. And she's like, why? Was it that bad? Dan, that was her response. Was it that bad? Right? So when I compete, Dan, I go on stage and I'm looking for her or him. I represent the courage and the strength that I have the freedom to do what I do. So I am on stage seeking the eyes of people that said, someday could that be me? Someday can I be that free? I represent freedom. That's why I do it. It's not necessarily like, oh, I care. I'm not even that egoic, but that's my why. And this is the story, is that you need to know your why. You need to know that you're doing it something beyond you. And where the hierarchy of need that Maslow missed wasn't the Buddha, I am awake. It was, I am here to serve humanity. There's a full top to that. We are here to serve. That's our highest calling.
I love, first of all, thank you for sharing that and the inspiration you have for helping other people share their stories. I think there's healing in like being able to vocalize something and make sense of it. Like if it can come out of your mouth in a coherent way, then we've kind of learned some of the lessons, hopefully. For me, it was a personal test. It's like to see if I had some elements, but I didn't know if I had all the elements. It was literally, do you have this, Dan? I talk about my kind of pivotal moment is I saw a photo of myself and I saw a guy with so more excuses than reasons. It was amazing.
Wow.
I just saw
When was that?
Like, this was about 4 years ago. It's just
so the picture, what did it represent to you?
It represented somebody who didn't do what he said.
Whoa.
I know.
That's intense.
I couldn't, that's the only way I can see it. Like it's, you know, a guy who talks about peak performance, a guy who encourages others to be their best. And look at me, I'm like Mr. Average. I was like, what the heck?
Holy shit.
And I in my book, I talk about this trap of average is we get stuck. And like my next book is about unstuck, is how do we get out of this? But our psychology plays this part that gets us comfortable. And it's like, hey, stay there, don't go anywhere. So,
were you disturbed? I mean, how did you feel? It's like, I love that what Tony Robbins says, you have to get to a place where you're actually disturbed to make change. What was your experience on that? Because we all have that.
It was a point of self-frustration, and the word I use is dissatisfaction. I looked at it and I was like, that's not enough.
Was it like disgust or just dissatisfied?
It wasn't disgust.
Yeah.
It was just, so the only way I can say is I ran out of excuses. I ran out of excuses. I ran out of justifications, and everything that came out of my mouth or my head was just like, shut up. Like literally just shut up. Like, you know, you have a daughter now, you're trying to teach by example. You're just full of like, it was literally one photo. And I didn't even look, my mum's like, you don't even look that bad. I'm like, you're not seeing what I see, Mum. I'm seeing so many more things, like layers on it. And I tried to do Ironman. That failed. I died. I'm not a distance athlete. I figured it out. I tried to do it. I loved it. And it was an amazing experience, but everything hurt and I embarrassed myself. And like people were waiting for me to finish. And like, can you just go now? I've got one more lap. But then I said, right, I'm going to take on bodybuilding. And for me, the journey's been really interesting because although it was maybe like a selfish calling for the first minute, what I realized is if I can be more open, if I can be more honest, if I can put everything on display, then I give permission for people to do the same thing, which I think is kind of similar to you. Is I'm not doing this to be the best. I'm competitive as hell. I'm going to win. Like I'm going to, whatever's going to happen, I'm going to win and I'm going to take it and just do what I can. But I procrastinated for a long time. I took too long to start this journey and I've missed out on so many things as a result. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about not having done it sooner, to kick people in the butt to get on action. I had massive amounts of imposter syndrome as I went through the journey. I'd wake up every day, look at a scale, say, you've like all the words that come in. I'd look in the mirror and be like, who do you? Yes. You're not bodybuilder. You're just a fat guy looking in the mirror. It's like, put your shirt back on. All of these things, right?
Oh my
all
God,
of the voices that go on.
Dude.
And then the other thing that I had to learn was like you said, balance is bullshit. And I love that is there's no balance. Like they always ask rich and famous people, like, do you have work-life balance? They're like, yeah, I have an island and a yacht and all this kind of stuff. It's like, did you have it 5 minutes ago when you were in the hustle? Like, did you? And like, no, man, I was in it. Like nobody saw me for 3 years and they came out and I was this person. And this is what we've got to learn. We've got to learn how to say no and sacrifice. And it's hard. It's hard to have those conversations. We were talking about it, like fajita night last night. And this, I love, we are the biggest nerds. Fajita night last night with the family is tricky because, I'm on 2 weeks out from a comp, so I'm prep diet. So I cook the meat, I cook the beef mince, and then I'm like, right, half there, half over here, put it into another pan. I take some kitchen towel and I'm dabbing the meat as I'm cooking it. I'm pouring all this stuff out. I'm literally getting it as dry as I possibly can. So like I went through 3 pieces of the kitchen towel just to make sure I didn't have any fat. And then I had a lettuce leaf to wrap it all up. And I'm like, come on, this is crazy. So we are nerds. I think the other thing as well, and you mentioned this, is the vanity piece. Oh, let's come back to those because I've got some interesting stories that pop in my head. The stupidity piece is hilarious. So I was years ago, I was a fitness correspondent for the radio. They would call me up if they want to do an interview about research. It's like the latest research shows you can get fit in 3 seconds a day. What do you think? Dan Story. I'm like, bah. Yeah. But I went on to this one show and it was me. I can't remember the other person. It was a doctor. There was like 4 of us and they did an IQ test and it was some kind of aptitude thing. And then at the end, they released the results. And I remember the doctor's face because he was like, he's a doctor, right? It's like, I'm smart, I'm intelligent, I do all these things. I'm a doctor, la la. Sorry for all you doctors. I do love you, but I had to stereotype that on a little bit. And he came second on the IQ test, quite a long way behind me. Oh. And what he didn't realize is I have a degree in mathematics and sports science. At the time, I think I was studying for a master's degree in nutrition and exercise physiology. I do maths tests and like brain puzzles for fun. Like that's the kind of thing I am. So the stupidity piece and like the amount that we have to read to be on top of our game is insane.
100%.
But the vanity thing is really interesting. Like I was literally in the gym this morning. I had a hoodie on. Like the hoodie is like on, the headphones are on. I'm not paying attention. I'm not looking at anyone. I'm not competing. Like nobody can see anything like that. And I'm lifting the tiniest little weights on the shoulder press. Like I'm there. I'm like, I can't lift anything. No failure, no pain, just movement. And there's a guy behind me and he's got as much weight on the cables as he can. He's doing this tiny little movement and it's like no muscle action or anything like that. I'm like, the biggest thing that I've lost, not the weight, not anything like that, is ego.
Wow.
Like the ego goes. It's like if you're a bodybuilder, I'm not trying to lift weight. I'm trying to, like, I think Kai Green said it is, I'm not trying to lift a weight. That's what weightlifting is. Like I'm trying to bodybuild and that's using resistance to challenge my muscles. And so I think losing ego and just being okay not to be the strongest guy in the room and all those kind of things, like, or not need to prove it, is actually one of the biggest things. I think that's one of the hurdles is we have to get over that ego piece. If we're going to go anywhere, like we have to get rid of that. It's like,
well, it's our body's the art form.
Yeah.
So it's objectifying our body as art form, as the observer. And it can go south, it can go south for people. There's a lot of eating disorders and body dysmorphia. I have body dysmorphia. I think that, when I'm not in bodybuilding and I'm not in competition, I feel like I'm huge. I'm 118 pounds and 5'2", but I feel like I'm 180, right? So the body dysmorphia is real. However, we are artists. We are scientists and artists of the body form. We are Michelangelo. We're always looking at giving our body symmetry. And to diet down for a show, for those listening, and this is Dan's show, you've probably heard him talk about it, is an art and a science experiment like no other. And it requires like such intense consistency, which I don't have discipline. People think, oh my God, Katie, you must be so disciplined. It's my last strength in the Strength Finder, number 34 out of 34. I am not a disciplined person, but I have the ability to focus on something. And that, I believe, is a superpower. But it's pretty incredible, the bias that people have, for sure.
Yeah, I definitely get some looks. I've still got fake tan in various crevices and cracks across my body. And occasionally when the t-shirt does come off, people look at me like, "What color are you? Orange? Like, you look like my fence post in the garden." That's basically what you look like.
Well, when you see people on stage, you look spectacular in the light. But if you saw me real time right after a show, you'd be horrified. You'd think I was a freak with the hair and the makeup and the tan. It's like I'm another color. Like that's not. It's superhuman. But this is part of the pageantry. And I was listening to Dr. Mike. I love him. He's I know. He's great. But he was talking about like the reason why he didn't do well in bodybuilding is he respected the weight training, but he couldn't commit to the pageantry. So he never did well because he just didn't care enough about the pageantry. And you have to have the science and the art is the pageantry. You have to have that part of it down in order to win.
What I learned, so I'm quite lucky. Physique doesn't have to have too much pageantry. Like I stand there in shorts, like I move, I try and look like a triangle the whole time.
But there's still art to that.
There's some art.
Yes.
But classic is where I love classic bodybuilding and CBum. Congratulations.
I know.
That is such an amazing division now.
Beautiful
and like, he's going to go off and do some amazing things as dad. I'm so excited for him. But that movement pattern to have a body on display, and actually I've watched it. I've got the DVD of Pumping Iron over there. The opening scene with Franco Columbo and Arnold, they were in the ballet studio. Just the movement pattern. It's like, how can you combine something that's so strong and powerful with something that's so graceful? And some people just don't get it. Like Arnold's saying, like, I don't get why people would try and drive a quarter mile in 5 seconds. Like, I don't get that. Like, I understand engineering, and it's just a world that I could never get into because I'm not smart in that way. I'm smart in other ways. But like the physical challenge to combine all those elements just fascinates the life out.
It is.
Can't say anything more than that.
And it's insane, and it's like really difficult, and to come off of the show is a whole nother thing. But I would say the most important thing for anyone who's considering it is have other things in your life aside from your show.
Yeah.
Because the people who crash and burn are the people that only live for the sport. And you will burn, you will crash and burn. And for me, it's like I pick a show when I have a lot going on, like I'm writing a book, or I give it so it gives me parameter and structure around my life, but it is not my life, even though it is the central force of my life, but it's not everything. And, there is some sense of isolation. And Dan, you and I were talking about that when you become obsessed in anything in life, whether it's developing a company, writing a book, a sport, that's a solo mission, your relationships around you are very much changed. Yeah. And so these are conversations that are really important to have. And when one person, and this is true for in a marriage or any kind of relationship, that when one person achieves great success, it's a challenge for the marriage, right? And it could be grief, it could be success, but yet these conversations have to be had prior to, and bringing people along for the ride. But then this is the most important thing I want people to hear. If you were given a gift, if you know that you're here to represent or do more, to bring your body, your mind, your spirit, your success to another level, you have been given that gift. And that, I believe, is from God. Your primary relationship is your vertical relationship with your creator. These relationships around us are all just people journeying along for the ride. So I would say to this, that if someone in your life is challenging you and something that you really truly believe that you are here called to do as my coach told me, Katie, your train is pulling out of the station. Either they're with you or they're not with you. And that's the kind of commitment you have if you want to be successful in life. No regrets, because you know what? People are waiting for you on the other side. People are waiting to be inspired by you. So don't settle. That's all I got to say about that.
Beautiful. The Kate McKay train has left the station. We are honored to have been part of this leg of the journey. So thank you, as I said at the beginning, for bringing everything, for being so open, for being so energetic, and just unapologetically you, which I think is phenomenal. You mentioned you're going to give everyone a little gift. You teased it earlier. What can we share with the listeners? As
right on. I'll give you a link to the agility mindset. You can just download that. Really, my thesis on how to live a kick-ass life. I'm really excited to share it with all of you. I'm probably releasing that probably in the same around the time that you're releasing your new book. I'm really excited about your book as well. And I'm looking forward to actually joining in some projects with you, some writing projects. So I think we have some goodness coming on across the pond. And best of luck on your competition. Go be the champion that you are, Dan.
Thank you very much, Kate. This was a phenomenal exploration of so many different things. And if you listened along and you've liked it, make sure you like and subscribe and follow Kate. And I'll share or check in the notes for the links to the little sneaky preview. Thank you very much for the gift. Kate, have an amazing rest of the day. And if you've been listening, thanks for joining us on Personal Transformation Podcast. See you next time.